Breaking news: Kim Jong-un's much-hyped assault units have been demolished within minutes on the battlefield. A major embarrassment for Pyongyang and a sharp reminder of the realities of modern warfare. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Frontline Report channel. And before we dive deep into today's update, please make sure to subscribe and like this video so you never miss important frontline developments and clear explanations of what's really happening on the ground. The story begins with North Korea projecting an image of strength and intimidation. For months, state media portrayed its assault units as elite, fearsome, and unstoppable. They were paraded before the world with heavy gear, bold marching formations, and a style meant to convey discipline and toughness. From the outside, this looked like a formidable addition to Russia's war machine in Ukraine. The presentation was sleek, polished, and deliberately intimidating. But the problem is that war is not won by appearances. The so-called exterior strength was all about the camera, all about propaganda, and none of it could stand up to the harsh conditions of a modern European battlefield where drones, precision artillery, and high-tech surveillance dictate the tempo of combat. When we step inside, the reality of these units becomes clear. The morale was shallow, the training thin, and the equipment outdated. Soldiers lacked modern night vision, secure communication systems, and the kind of battlefield adaptability that Ukrainian defenders have honed through 2.5 years of relentless conflict. The interior of the units was less about military effectiveness and more about political theater. Pyongyang wanted to show solidarity with Moscow and to claim that it was capable of deploying special forces abroad, but inside these formations there was very little that could actually withstand sustained combat. The shortfalls became obvious immediately. Performance on the battlefield revealed everything. Within minutes of direct engagement, Ukrainian forces, backed by drone reconnaissance and precision-guided artillery, dismantled these units with shocking speed. Columns were spotted, tracked, and destroyed. Soldiers scattered under fire. The promised elite troops collapsed just like any poorly prepared force would when thrust against a modern army that has adapted to high-tech warfare. Ukrainian units, already adept at neutralizing Russian formations, found these North Korean contingents even easier to handle. Their movements were predictable, their tactics outdated, and their reactions sluggish. In combat, performance speaks louder than any parade, and here the performance was abysmal. Safety, or rather the lack of it, compounded the disaster. The North Korean troops had no reliable armor shielding them from artillery strikes. They lacked proper electronic warfare countermeasures to defend against Ukrainian drones. Communication lines were vulnerable to interception and disruption. Supply chains were weak, leaving them exposed and isolated after their first clashes. In modern combat, survival depends on layered defenses, fallback options, and technology that can detect and counter threats in real time. These units had none of that. They were essentially thrown into the most dangerous environment in Europe with nothing to protect them. And Ukraine exploited that vulnerability with ruthless efficiency. North Korea had promoted these units with a so-called unique selling point: elite manpower and unwavering loyalty. Pyongyang's propaganda machine claimed they would bring discipline, ferocity, and unmatched commitment to the battlefield. But in practice, those traits collapsed under fire. Unfamiliar with Ukraine's terrain and used to modern Western weaponry, and unprepared for the psychological shock of precision drone warfare, the troops found themselves overwhelmed. Instead of being remembered for discipline and ferocity, they're now remembered for how quickly they were exposed as hollow. The only thing unique here was how swiftly the facade crumbled. And then comes the matter of price. In war, the cost is not just measured in equipment lost or troops killed. It is also about political prestige. For Kim Jong-un, the gamble of sending units to Ukraine was supposed to raise his profile as a player in global conflict, to show off North Korea's ability to project force beyond its borders. Instead, the cost has been humiliation. Those units that were supposed to elevate his image instead tarnished it. Internationally, analysts now see Pyongyang's military power as even more hollow than before. For Russia, relying on such forces exposes desperation. For North Korea, The price tag includes shattered credibility and wasted resources. In propaganda wars, perception matters as much as the battlefield, and here the perception is devastating. What makes this moment even more significant is the timing. Ukraine, under pressure from a long war, needs constant victories to maintain morale and international support. The rapid destruction of these North Korean units gave Kyiv exactly that. Images and reports of the collapse spread quickly. Undercutting the propaganda, both Moscow and Pyongyang wanted to push. Western audiences saw that Russia was resorting to outside forces of questionable quality, while Ukrainians gained a morale boost knowing they could dispatch such units with relative ease. Every destroyed convoy and every broken line of soldiers became a symbol of resilience and adaptability. When you consider the broader picture, the incident highlights just how much warfare has changed. Gone are the days when mass manpower alone could tip the balance. Today, precision, surveillance, mobility, and information warfare dominate. Ukraine has embraced these realities with drones, advanced artillery systems, and NATO training. North Korea, on the other hand, tried to export a force still stuck in mid-20th century methods, relying on parade ground discipline and heavy rhetoric rather than actual battlefield innovation. The mismatch was stark, and the results inevitable. Even more embarrassing for Kim Jong-Un is the contrast between promise and reality. Before deployment, North Korean media claimed that these units were specially trained, handpicked for their loyalty, and capable of fighting against imperial aggression. Within minutes of actual combat, that myth collapsed. It shows that the interior weaknesses were never meant to be tested. They were designed for display, not for war. The idea was to impress audiences at home and perhaps to convince Russia that North Korea could be a valuable partner. Instead, both Pyongyang and Moscow are left dealing with a narrative of failure. The implications go beyond just battlefield losses. For Kim, the setback undermines his negotiating position globally. Every time he tries to project strength, opponents now remember how easily his forces were crushed. It makes threats less credible and alliances shakier. For Russia, relying on external forces like this signals weakness and adds to the perception that Moscow's own reserves are stretched thin. It also raises questions about whether Russia can truly count on such allies, or whether they bring more embarrassment than assistance. From a military analysis perspective, the event is also a case study in the limits of propaganda-driven militarism. Appearances, uniforms, and slogans cannot survive contact with precision munitions and drone reconnaissance. The battlefield is the great equalizer, stripping away all illusions. And in this case, the illusions vanished in a matter of minutes. The safety net did not exist, the performance collapsed, and the so-called elite units turned into symbols of vulnerability. For Ukraine, the destruction of these units will likely serve as a talking point in diplomatic arenas. It reinforces the narrative that Western support is making the Ukrainian army ever more capable and that attempts to bolster Russia with outside troops will fail. For North Korea, the silence that follows will be telling. State media will either avoid the subject entirely or try to spin it. But internationally, the story is out. The embarrassment cannot be hidden. To sum it up, North Korea's assault units looked threatening on the outside, but were empty on the inside. Their performance was disastrous, their safety systems non-existent, their unique selling points hollow, and their price paid in humiliation rather than victory. Kim Jong-un wanted show of force, but what he got was a show of weakness. Ukraine capitalized on that, and the world took notice. That's all for today's breakdown. If you found this deep dive useful and you want to keep getting clear, fact-based updates from the front lines, don't forget to subscribe to Frontline Report and like this video. Your support helps us continue to bring you the real story behind the headlines. Stay tuned, because the battlefield is shifting every day, and we'll be here to explain it.